Welcome back to Cougar Chronicle. I'm Laura James, and this is...
John Fortney.
You got it, our superintendent.
Right.
So, listen, do you tell dad jokes? I don't know that about you.
Oh, well, they're grandpa jokes.
They're grandpa jokes, that's true.
But the old mama tomato, papa tomato, baby tomato, walking down the street, baby tomato falls behind, pop tomato runs back and goes, ketchup.
Oh! I had to ask. I'm so sorry.
You brought it on.
I brought it on.
You started? Okay.
These scenes,
Yeah.
right? You just want to just
That has to stay in. I would also like to point out that I didn't bring the pom-poms, but I was the recipient of
That's
said
true.
pom-poms.
So, right,
And
so you're just fulfilling your role.
the old saying, growing up in New York, is you hate the game, not the player. I didn't make the rules. I just know how to operate within them.
Well, you know, I asked you... Maybe we'll get through the show. So our favorite segment was with Michael Bessette, our assistant superintendent, and I understand you have a little dad joke?
no.
Yes, you do.
Ask my daughter; she'll tell you that I am the joke. I don't know.
When I hear fungus among us, I think isn't that a dad joke?
Kind of, but no, it really is. I mean, there's so many different ways it can go. Borderline's insulting. I don't think we go with that. So here's the one thing. We get into, I think every October, we have Mr. Bessette teaches a course to some of our elementary kids. And if you remember last year, we talked about that. We were dressed up as, we had the big battle, and we'll talk about November who won. With the SEU, we all dressed up. And so myself, Mr. Bessette, and then Doreen was Star Trek.
Oh, I love that.
And so he was the science officer, and I had a picture of him teaching the fungus class, the zombie fungus piece.
I love that.
And I don't know how many folks realize, or people realize, how great of an educator Michael Bessette is. Not just as the work he does as assistant. I know he hates it, but he has won awards as a classroom teacher.
Yes.
And I had a chance to sit and watch that last year when I saw that, and we had some PD this year. So I think we're kind of talking some of that, but then leading into, as we talk our portrait series, we've had portrait of administrator, we've talked portrait educator, kind of introducing some of our portrait of a learner, is what we're there from that.
Okay.
So I'm going to turn it over without the dad joke on this one.
Well,
Sorry about that, Michael.
Halloween. I guess the idea for me to sit here and talk to you today a little bit is about what do we believe is important when we talk about student learning. And one of the aspects that we've identified in our portrait of a learner is curiosity. Okay. And so curiosity comes in many shapes and forms, but as a former science teacher, it's my bread and butter, right? So I don't think you can teach without using an inquiry-based model effectively in general, but in science, it's actually just about the most important thing I think that you can create in your culture of learning for students. Curiosity, as I said, comes in many different shapes and forms. And for me, personally, John's referred to me as an onion many times, where he says, I can't believe I just peeled off another layer, and you'll find out something about me that, that it was part of my background, my history, the things that I do for entertainment, learning, whatever it is.
He has done
I've done a few things. I'm fortunate to be in that position.
And I appreciate that about him, because when we were first getting acquainted with one another, it was, we talked about hobbies, and I had my hobbies, and then he did text me back, and I made this comment early on, and I still tell my wife that I'm like, had we met in high school, we would have been best friends.
Best friends, exactly.
Because of just the level of inquiry, and really great colleagues now.
For me, in terms of some of the things that are going on in the world, mycology has always been a big deal for me, because my father is a mycologist, and I really have two fathers. I have a father who is a stepfather, and I have a father who is a biological father, and both of them were college professors, believe it or not. One in the arts and one in sciences.
Wow, that's interesting.
One was a professor of Canadian literature, studied the deportation, the Acadian deportation, and the other one was a mycologist. And I grew up in Maine with him in my foundational years, and as part of a presentation for our 5th grade class, Beth Perkins, hope she's doing well,
yes.
Out there, had invited me to come in and teach to the New London 5th graders. And so I had spent, not a course, but an actual lesson teaching about cordyceps fungi, which some people are aware of, some people are not, because it's a really spooky Halloween kind of themed-based lesson where I could teach about this thing called the zombie fungus, which was a cordyceps fungi that attacks insects, a variety of different insects,
Really
but
cool.
only
It's
insects.
cool.
It takes over
the
their
right
brains.
level of gross.
Oh, no way.
For fifth
Yeah, it's
graders.
fascinating.
They love it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it gets into it, it gets creepy, but
Sure.
you know, it also speaks directly to the root of curiosity, because people will say to you, fifth graders, oh my gosh, how can you possibly teach a fifth grader or an elementary school student hold their attention? I think some scientists, research-based, whatever, will say you can only get them for 15 minutes. I promise you that if you go into that discussion and you're in that room with 60 plus kids, that they can hold the attention if they choose to hold the attention.
Right.
We're competing with a lot of things out there, video games, music, media, whatever it may be. But teaching matters, and teaching can be incredibly creative, and teaching can be incredibly fun, and content matters sometimes too. And kids will come to the table and they're like, oh my gosh, I have to learn about mushrooms, right?
Right.
And the honest answer is when they're walking out, I can't get them to leave the environment. Why? Because I really target their curiosity. Is this going to happen to me?
Yeah.
Is this going to be something that I'm going to experience in my world? How can I relate it to something that I've had connections with, like a movie or a television or a sci-fi comic book or something that they've engaged with, which is all part of the teaching experience when we go through this process. And it's a narrative experience. So we start with pictures about personal stuff that they may not have ever known about me as the teacher.
Right.
And we sit back and we kind of tell a little history story about how life occurred for me as a student of their age and what was very different in my world. And then I take them all through a progression of how the zombie fungus came into my life, right? So when we talk about curiosity, every teacher has to hone in on that. And I think that's one of the things that we in our community don't always give teachers enough credit for, is that, yeah, I'm an onion, okay? I may have been in Chile, and I may have been sitting there collecting, hiking across Chile and doing some really wonderful things and seeing my, fungus that was growing on trees there that was collected by Darwin, Darwin's
So
fungus,
interesting.
right?
Yeah.
But there are teachers who've done some amazing things, and they travel. And if you go into our policy manual and you start to look at some of the things that are in there, it's strange when you encounter some of our policies, and one of them actually speaks to the idea of what becomes professional development credit for our teachers, right? And people will often question why we would give a teacher professional development credit for maybe going to Jamaica, right? Or doing something like that on a trip, which can potentially be, if it's set up properly, a professional development experience. For me, in this last year in April, my wife and I decided to go south, and we went to Jamaica for a visit, and another layer of the onion. I'm 3 courses away from being a master scuba diver. And so I took another course
Okay.
while on vacation, and I learned how to spearfish for lionfish, which is an invasive fish, right? So by taking that course and taking that opportunity, I also collected some credit time for myself, I actually gave up my science teaching credential, but I want to continue the passion of lifelong learning. And I added to my wealth. So when you look at teachers who travel, or maybe they're going out with family in the summer or something, and then they come back, and you ask in that policy, why do we credit that? It's because that teacher went to Walden Pond, and they hung out there for a day, and they actually experienced what it was like to be at Walden, or they went up to Prince Edward Island and saw Anne of Green Gables, or it's because they travel and they make their experiences into creative moments that really pound curiosity home for kids who don't have those encounters and those experiences. When I look at a kiddo and I say to them, that video game that you saw, or that HBO movie that was The Rest of Us, or whatever it is, I forget the name of the darn thing, that creature is a cordyceps fungus. It was rooted in that particular issue. So I can connect this unrelated
Right, the
learning.
possibility.
It could happen.
Right.
So you take something that,
Yeah.
so that they're not familiar with, an experience they don't
I feel
have.
like we need to lower the lights and have flashlights under our
I know.
face,
And
like
I'll
in a
be going
fire.
like this.
Well, you're always welcome to come. But you take that unrelated experience that they've never had, and you help them to connect to the experiences they do have. And I think that's critically important in great teaching, and our teachers are masters of it. So putting it all together, just wrapping it up, to me, when we talk about curiosity, it is the foundation that gets to engagement. It's the foundation that links the world to their realizations of who they are, what they want to be. It puts it all together. And so it is one of the core issues that we have to focus on for a great educational experience for kids.
Motivational speaker. And if you can make things high interest for students, you have them.
Well,
do.
and it's exposure to things too, which is you look at some of the things that with the winter activities and the nature center that we run, the nature's classroom that we do with the different grade levels, the Washington D.C. trip with the 8th graders. I mean, there's these things that we also create exposure opportunities where kids can then dive in. We were talking about the use of technology and not taking away from the importance of going to the Smithsonian, but there was a virtual, we saw a virtual tour of the Smithsonian that the district could do an investment in VR glasses and literally set a kid loose in a classroom in Kearsarge into the Smithsonian to experience.
That's amazing.
And dive in. And not to say that being there live isn't important or having those kind of trips, but we all know that a kid that is being taken on a tour and going, if you look right, I don't want to look right, versus you give a kid and you go, you know what, you have a class period potentially to go and live your world and go explore what you have interest in. And so, whereas as we get limited with some of those things, they're great experiences, but with some of those great experiences have limitations. So as we talk about how do we integrate technology, how do we foster curiosity? Because curiosity is about asking questions. And the more that we question things, the closer we get to things. And it's hard to hate something when you're far away, or things that are unknown become less scary to us, or whatever the case may be. But again, it's that idea of creating these lifelong learner mentalities, because growth is not optional for us.
Absolutely. As usual, we have a little over a minute left. In the last minute, can you tell us, were you always curious? And how did you, as a kid, were you the kid going, ooh?
Well, they say ADHD is a blessing and a curse. And I happen to be the inattentive type, right? But yet I could spend hours if I was doing the right things, focusing on something that would capture my attention and my engagement. And I think that is the truth. It's when you're motivated by curiosity, you're motivated by the things that interest you, you want to explore. So yeah, I think I've always been a curious person, and I lived in a household that offered me many opportunities to do that, and we didn't have much growing up, to be honest with you. It doesn't take much to spark curiosity.
It doesn't.
And people say, well, you may have had the wealth to travel. No, I didn't. I grew up in a very, very poor family in some respects. But I will say this, in the family I grew up in, with a family that I had exposure with, every single one of them always valued learning and valued looking at things with a different lens and asking the right questions. And I think that becomes cultural. And I appreciate that. And that's what drove me towards loving teaching in some respects. It's not the only part of it. I mean, we've got other things that are part of the Portrait of a Learner, but to me, it's the foundational piece.
Well, we need you back in November so we can talk about the Portrait of a Learner.
Well, we'll continue. Because understand, the Portrait of a Learner is really those three items. It's curious, it's conscientious, and it's caring. And those are really the three elements that we go to. So we didn't necessarily directly talk about Portrait of a Learner, but we're talking about those elements. So we'll definitely close it out next month and kind of do a deeper dive. But again, it's...
There's a reason it's our favorite segment.
Yeah,
Michael, we appreciate all you're doing for our children and for our community.
It's a team effort. Those great teachers out there doing some amazing things.
They are. Yeah. They really are. Well, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. What a great.
Always a fun segment.
Yeah, always wonderful.
And again, the viewers and you get 10 to 12 minutes of that once a month.
Yeah.
And I have the opportunity to be on a team and get these things every day.
Oh, that's a joy. So. Well, especially following our segment on school safety and remembering why we're here in the